All right, good evening. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed last week's conversation. Just to kind of preface, I know we were getting into some good discussion towards the end. If at 8:30 you feel like you need to drop off, that's fine. But I will leave it open. I'll leave the Zoom open until 8:45. So at 8:30 again, if you feel like you need to leave, that is fine. If you want to stick around for about 15 extra minutes, then you can do that. Father John or Susan, are you all going to open up with prayer this evening?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I'll do so.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Let us begin in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, we thank you. We have this opportunity to gather together, to listen to one another, to share our thoughts, experiences, to hear the truth of your will in our lives and how we are to embrace that in life, in love, and relationship with one another. Continue to actions that all we do bring glory to your name. These things we ask in the name of Jesus the Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So welcome everybody back with us. Last time, as John mentioned, we had pretty lively discussion and went beyond the 8:30 mark, but ended at about 8:45. I think just a couple of minutes. I know that not everyone who was tuned in was able to share if they had something they wanted to share. So for those who didn't get a chance to share last week, if there's anything on your mind that's been burning all week long that you'd like to share with us, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes and give you a chance to do so. Anyone who didn't get a chance to speak last week, just remember to unmute before you talk. Anyone at all have any thought, reflection?
I do. I would just like to clarify. I know this isn't in the book, but could we please clarify as a starting line that I think most people do accept the races in the world. Can we establish that fact just as a baseline to start with, for me to understand the difference there with social construction? Because I always learned that there were three basic races in the world: Caucasian, the Mongoloid, or the Asian race that migrated to Alaska through the Bering Strait and came down the eastern coast of Canada and the United States into Central America. And that's where we got the Native Americans. And then the third race was the Negroid race from Africa, of course. If we could just establish, she assumes that I don't feel like it's clear when then she just all of a sudden jumps into being racism as being socially constructed. Well, I don't know, Susan or Father, could you please clarify how you would define social racism as being socially constructed?
Let me respond, and then I'll let Susan also respond to it. I would say initially that when you look at the history of what has developed, a lot of the differences in the races and the racism that is socially constructed is based on the way people of one dominant culture have treated people of another dominant culture. It wasn't the fact that any race is any different, any better, any inferior to the other. Historically, when you look at what happened with the Native Americans in this country and then the African Americans afterwards, it was the way they were treated first. And then there was a whole process of educating and feeding information into the education system to justify the treatment of those of the African Americans or the Native Americans. But it doesn't mean that they were in any way inferior to begin with, or any group was superior to the other. So I think we have to be clear about that. It's based on the treatment and then how to justify the treatment after the fact. Susan, did you want to make a comment on that? Susan?
I agree with Father, and racism is not just race, it's how when we base our actions on race. And it's kind of a thorny issue. Actually, race is very controversial. Some people believe there is one human race that started in Africa, and the coloration of the skin is a function of melanin, which is different depending upon how close you are to the equator. Now that we have DNA studies, that's actually kind of playing out. We have a video that I didn't include in this, but I can share it with Joan. They got a lot of college students together and did DNA studies. And what was kind of interesting is DNA correlation was not necessarily more prominent, like me to a white person. I might have more similar DNA to an African American person or an Asian person. An Asian student in a class, her DNA may be 95% closer to what an African American's DNA is. Scientists are totally rethinking race. And I think most scientists would not say there are three races, though it is true. There was a migration of people from Asia over the Bering Strait. The African people were brought here, but really, race is a very thorny issue. Racism is treating people differently based on our perception of race. You want to add to that?
Well, I'm Paul.
I can't hear you, Paul. Are you unmuted?
Was I muted?
There, I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, I've got a medical background, and I've looked to some of this. From genetic studies, there is no difference to define race by Caucasian, Negroid, Mongoloid. That's, since we have DNA mapping now, that's all been proven to be untrue, that there's essentially no differences. There is actually probably more difference between a man's DNA and a woman's DNA, because a man has a Y chromosome and doesn't have two X chromosomes. So that genetic material actually makes his percentage probably different than what people think there is a difference between a Black person or a white person. So genetically, there's no difference in the races.
No.
Now, I spoke a minute ago. Did you all hear me, or was I muted?
I think we heard you.
Okay, good. Okay.
I'm glad that you asked the question, though, because one of the things I wanted to begin with, it goes back to last week's session, something that Ruth Ann had spoken about when she talked about people operating out of different sets of norms, and those that fit the norms and others that don't fit the norm. And that's one of the reasons why some people feel justified in treating people outside of the norm differently. So my question then becomes, okay, so who sets the norm for everybody? And God does. Okay, so let's begin with that understanding. God set the norm in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, when God said, let us make humanity in our own image after our likeness. Now, let us make, which means we're talking triune God, as we've come to know God is. And he's talking about we are all made, every one of us, in God's own image and after God's own likeness. It sounds good. One of the best ways that I have heard it described for us to apply to where we are today and what we're looking at was given by Father Brian Massengale. He describes the triune God image and likeness in these words: diversity without subordination, distinction without separation. That's the norm for all humanity. Diversity without subordination, distinction without separation. And I think if we can keep that in mind, we can break through all the barriers that cause us to think or act or separate ourselves from others. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes.
My name's Angela Weathers. I'm joining this group tonight. This is my first time. I don't know if I was supposed to read some kind of a book, but I joined the group because I understand you all were discussing race and how it relates to human beings in this world that we're living in. And I always thought that with that verse in Genesis, that it was all about, when I was little and going to Catholic school, I always thought that it was meant to be a man was made in God's image, and the image of God was white at that time. I have become aware that it's all about humanity, that God made the man in his image meant the humanity of man. Is that what you're saying, Father?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And we all have to embrace that concept. We don't set the norm for humanity. God has already set the norm for all of us. And that means everybody fits.
And that's the beauty of this book study. It's helping us to look into our hearts and our minds and figure out what are the norms that we operate on. Are we operating on God's norms? Are we operating on things we've been taught? And I think Robin makes a very good case for the fact that we have been taught throughout our lives that it's better to be white. And nobody really said that to us, but we get these messages subliminal and through TV and through knowing who's in leadership in various organizations. And so that's the big job each of us has to do. How do I feel about racism? How do I feel about even talking about it? How do I feel about other people, men, women, African-American people, people who are like me and people who are different than me? And both Robin and Brian Massengale, who wrote the article that I asked, was one of the resources that I put on session 2. It was the assumption of white privilege and what we can do about it. Both of them say that before we can ever eradicate racism that is the social construct that we operate on, in the United States, we have to really be clear about our own feelings. We have to feel the anger, the confusion, the shame and the guilt, because we probably said and done things early in our lives. And if we bury that, we can't really do productive work. So they both really make a big point of the feelings. So please express any feelings. I was taken by Ruth Ann's comment too about norms. And when Father and I talked, we both, yeah, that's the way the human mind works. We create these norms, and we have to constantly re-examine our minds and our behaviors to see how we're operating, and if that's really consistent with our Catholic Christian teachings.
Yes. With that in mind, I'd like to give us a little bit of a reflection before we get into the session. And I'm going to do the reflection, then I'll let Susan sort of take over the conversation of the session tonight. And this reflection, which is also calls us to a self-examination, and it's entitled The Wolf. Okay, some of you may be familiar with it, The Wolf. A Native American grandfather was talking to his grandson about how he felt. He said, "I feel as if I have two wolves fighting in my heart. One wolf is the vengeful, angry, violent one. The other wolf is the loving, compassionate one. The grandson asked him, "Which wolf will win the fight in your heart?" The grandfather answered, "The one I feed." That's a challenging and self-examination type of question that we all have to address. You know, which one will win the fight in our hearts? The one we feed. Susan, let you take it from there.
Well, thanks for sharing that Native American wisdom. There's a lot of good spirituality out of that culture, and it really warms my heart to hear things like that. So if we look at chapter 3 and 4, the analogy of the wolves within us is quite appropriate. No, chapter 3 and 4. We're session. Okay. So in chapter 3, we're reminded that there's now a new racism. Those of you who are my age or even a little older will remember the 60s. It was very clear in the 60s who the racists were, we thought. They were the people with the fire hoses, the people with the scowls on their faces, the people throwing sticks at the little children trying to integrate schools. But now racism has a prettier face on the surface. But what Robin DiAngelo says is the new racism doesn't look the same as what we experienced in the 60s, but the outcomes are the same. What do you think she means by that? The new racism doesn't look the same, but the outcomes are the same. Think for a minute, what are the outcomes of racism?
This is Renee. I'm gonna say the outcome of racism has to do with keeping a certain group of people suppressed, keeping them in a controlled environment.
Mm-hmm.
And now we see racism looking differently. I'm 48 years old and in a professional environment. For me, racism looks like patients not wanting to see me because I'm Black. People getting denied consideration for applications, for loans, admission into colleges, etc. So before it was racism as overtly being called the N-word, seeing the people with the KKK hood on their face because they were cowards and too scared to be seen. Now it's in a different light. Racism wears a suit and a tie and a pastor's cloth. It looks different, but it's still the same. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Renee.
I appreciate that. Anybody else have some reflections on that?
I was going to say, I would think it also has to do, branching off from what Renee said, the ability to, I don't want to say acquire wealth, but to, further yourself and your family economically. And that's something that has not been allowed to happen for groups of people in our country now for decades, and it still doesn't. And that, being denied a loan, being denied the inability to go to college, or your parents don't own the home, so they can't take out a home equity loan to maybe help you or even sign loan papers, et cetera. So there's a lot of those types of obstacles are still very much there that are keeping whole groups of color from accessing economically what those of us who were blessed, from that perspective, we were beneficiaries of it. And our families took advantage of it and, got us further down the road. But for us to sit there and say that other people didn't get left behind is not fair or accurate either.
Emily, you have your hand. Emily, you have something to say?
Yes, I just wanted to share just the same sentiment. Even, as Renee said, you mentioned you're a nurse, how are African American or people of color, how are they treated in the medical world? How do we see people treated just like when we go to lunch or when we go to dinner somewhere, as someone where we can see, everyone's smiling and nodding and looking, but even not necessarily that you would be looking for, you can see how that friendlier face of internal bias. To community racism, and then there's that extremely insidious racism that we are compelled to acknowledge even every day.
And I always thought that I didn't see color in my patients and I did an excellent job. I really believe that. But now I doubt myself, because you look at statistics and the outcomes are not commensurate. The white people are healthier than African American people. And it's not just because of choices we make. If you look at maternal child health, they've actually teased out African American mothers who deliver a baby have a higher chance of dying after childbirth and their baby outcome. And these could be doctors and nurses who know things. So it is a racial bias that plays out even in our medical system. You can look at COVID-19, and we had a much higher percentage of African Americans dying, especially in the earlier months. It's starting to level out a little bit. And with the vaccine distribution, there's been some problems. And I do know there are some efforts being made to take some clinics into the West End of Louisville. And there is just, there are a lot of inequalities. Sometimes they're hard to acknowledge.
I would just like to add very briefly that if anyone has any difficulty recognizing how racism is alive and well and active in today's world, one of the best ways you can recognize it is to listen to the lived experience of someone of a different race, okay? Because, you know, the experience tells you that on the surface, things may look different, but underneath, nothing has changed. And the second piece is that the more we get into the whole historical development of what has created this social construct, you know, how so many messages have been fed into people's minds to believe that there's all of these differences, that this group is superior to that group, this group deserves this and others don't. I mean, we can look at the data, the facts and the figures. We can look at the high number of African Americans and Hispanics in the prison system. And it kind of gives the message, well, white people don't create crimes too, you know, or they create and they don't get convicted, you know. And I have seen that play itself out when I was pastoring in the East End. You know, I've seen young African Americans, youth getting in trouble and immediately taken to JDAC detention center downtown. And I've seen young white Americans get into trouble and they're brought either to their parents or to their pastor, because some of them were brought to me, okay? And so there's this kind of a cover up, hush hush type of thing that favors one group versus the other.
I think it's very, much of it's very subtle. We don't really see it. The redlining, the school systems. But I don't think it's right in your face when we start looking at the voter suppression that's going on right now. Mm-hmm. The difficulty in Georgia, in certain neighborhoods that you spend hours in lines, in other neighborhoods you're done in minutes. There's and even here in Kentucky, we had such a successful election. Lots of people turned out. They got the candidate they wanted, but you know, and now they're looking at trying to tamp that down. We've had more people vote in this past election than we've ever seen in Kentucky, and yet they want to change it to something more restrictive and lower those numbers. I think that's just really right in our face. That shows that racism is alive and well.
Yes. Thanks, Dirk.
I watched a wonderful video last week. It was a young man interviewing his grandfather, and his grandfather left the South in the 60s because he heard his father, who was African American, being treated very disrespectfully by people in the community. So he left the South and he didn't even know where he was going to go. And this man ended up, a very resourceful guy, he ended up in California and he couldn't get a loan. He finally realized it was because he was Black. So instead of calling on the phone or going in person, he submitted his application by mail and he got his loan. Mm-hmm. And he gave 3 or 4 different examples. And he is an owner of a business, a very successful business owner now, but he learned to never try to apply for anything in person. And he circumvented the system. Mm-hmm. And there's also a book called I'm Still Here, and it's written by I can't remember, but the author said her parents gave her a very white sounding male name because they wanted her to be successful. Mm-hmm. And it worked. Mm-hmm. And she said she showed up for a college interview by expecting a white boy, and it was an African American girl. And it's a really nice book. I'm scared of the author of it. They gave her the name Austin so people would think she was a boy, and a white boy at that. So there's a lot of neat examples if you listen to people of how people have gotten around racism, but it's definitely alive and well.
I can tell you that prior to COVID-19 last year, I could walk any of you into certain businesses, particularly here in the east end of the city, and just have you walk around with me and just to browse, not maybe to buy, maybe not, but just to see what's there. And then I can point out to you in a matter of a few minutes that I am being watched and followed. Now, they have no idea who I am. They just see this Black person, and then they automatically think that I need to be watched and followed. And I can walk you through several businesses right here in the city where I've had that experience. I talked to some white American friends of mine who own their businesses about this, and they verified, they said, yes, this is true. And then they told me, and while they're busy watching and following the Black people, some of the white people are stealing them blind. So I said, well, that's part of what happens then, okay? But the point is that they haven't, in their minds, they have some need to watch and follow and automatically mistrust me only because of the color of my skin, because they don't know who I am and they've never asked. That's how racism is alive and well today, one instance of it.
I'm gonna chime in on that too, because just looking back to President Obama and how much disrespect was given to him, thank God he was light-skinned, because had he been dark, he'd have never got in to begin with. Yeah. Even if he was had the same qualifications, as smart as he was, as great a person as he was, had he been just a little shade darker, he would have never got voted in. At least that's how I feel. And probably a lot of other African Americans will agree. But, that's just reality, but it's sad.
Yes, yes. One of the things that Robin mentions in chapter 3, and we touched a little bit on this earlier, and that is about people of the dominant culture growing up in a culture that fosters white superiority in them from an early age. And so, as we begin to uncover the truth of things and why things are the way they are today, I think it calls everybody to go back and say, well, what was fed into my mind, into my perceptions, into my thinking and my attitude that I can now recognize as being straight out wrong, or just how I've been lied to. You can look at the education system, you can look at certain practices and languages and conversations that happened in the home among family members, especially some of the older generations talking with the younger generations. And I think there has to be an examining and uncovering of things that we were fed into our minds that we can now recognize and say that really was not true and it was not fair.
I think I can attest to what you just said. I moved down to this area and I taught school here in the independent school district. And I brought with me, I came down here from Louisville, and I brought with me a certain perception of what I wanted my classroom to be like and what I wanted the atmosphere to be like in that classroom. And I was putting Black characters on my bulletin boards, and that was apparently unheard of in '79 when I first came down here. And I had to address that issue with the superintendent of our district. They didn't think that. And my response was that I put characters up that represented me and how I felt. And I explained it that way. And then it became accepted, but I had to go and explain myself to the superintendent just because I had different characters up on my bulletin boards. I taught a Black history unit in my third grade classroom. It was a third grade classroom. I taught a Black history unit that I had brought in with me from the University of Louisville. And I had to verify and cite my sources, the whole nine. I had to explain everything that I put out there that I was teaching because it was always questioned. And I know that it was done because I'm a Black lady and I came down here in this community and I was not accepted. It took a while for that to happen for me. Mm-hmm. And that's all about, in my view, it's all about racism. It's all about the idea of it can't possibly be because I'm not familiar with it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that was my experience here when I first came down. It improved over time, not much, but it improved.
Well, good. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Can I interject something here? This is Maureen Welch. So, you started teaching or came down here, at least in Louisville, JCPS integrated their school systems in 1975. Okay. We had forced busing. I was a part of that. I was in 7th grade when it happened. It wasn't pretty. I can remember my mother saying, she would not have the neighbors say that her kids couldn't go to school with Black children, that we were going to go. It was perfect. This is what we should do. Everybody is equal. Okay. And it really, we went to school with Black kids, but they were in their part of the gym, or, if we had an assembly, even all through high school. I mean, everybody kind of stuck to their groups. So we were there, but we really weren't all together, however you want to put it. I mean, it's not like you had friends across races, but I mean, we learned a lot from each other. And I was bused to Shawnee in my sophomore year, and I considered it one of my best years in school. And I think because of that, I've always had a different impression of the different races, and it's been very positive. The piece that I'm blown away by and why I wanted to join this discussion is that was 45 years ago in the fall. And I am just amazed, how are we still in the same place we were in 1975 and we're still talking about this? And people are still following people around in a store based on their skin color. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, how do you get past that? And then also, how do I have a conversation with somebody to be able to address it? If somebody says something that's just blatantly racist, how do I have that conversation to go, hey, I don't believe that way?
Mhm.
That's kind of what I'm hoping we eventually get to on this.
Mhm.
I'd be happy to hear anybody's response to Maureen.
Mhm.
Well, I'm of the same opinion, because I guess I'm living in this false belief that, and I work in the school system, and I've seen both people of color as well as whiteness in the school system, and the parents, either they're involved in their child's education or they're not. I mean, we have that disadvantage depending on the environment that you're brought up in. And some of the kids of color are much better off than some of the Caucasian kids whose parents are not involved. And I am constantly reminded about Title IX. Title IX, our programs out in the public, in the community, are to eliminate discrimination and give opportunities to people of color. So are people not going to the higher ups, to the government, and reporting these acts of discrimination? Are they not reporting to the Better Business Bureau how people are treated or followed in a store? You know, there's places to speak up. And are we afraid to speak up? I mean, to be a teacher and be able to put characters of color on your bulletin board is an educational experience. You answer because you have Title IX gives you the right to do that. I guess I don't know.
Title IX was a for taking away the discrimination of women, not races per se. It's the difference between male and what male got as opposed to what female got. That's Title IX.
Yeah. Donna, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yes, I do. A couple of things that have been said recently. Number one, someone said, how do we start this? I think the beginning of it is dialogue. And I keep hearing that word over and over again, dialogue. And I know they're teaching a class specifically in dialogue at the Earth and Spirit Center on Newburgh Road. But I also wanted to state from previously that my pastor happens to also be a full-time Jefferson Metro County police officer. And during the peaceful protest in downtown Louisville, he happens to be a Black man. He was spit upon and called a traitor. And he has told me in the past how when he's walking in a parking lot, he will hear the clicks in the car when someone locks their car door. And I can remember when Barack Obama said that as well. But I think those of us who think something like Title IX is going to change the world are fooling ourselves. Thank you.
Hello, this is Roy Burns, and one of the things I learned from the book was how in our culture, white is the norm and anything not white is the aberration. And I think that colors the whole culture's approach to all of what folks have been talking about.
Yes, I agree. One of
And
the,
I don't think that you can't mandate, I don't think you can mandate anti-race, well, you can mandate anti-racism through law. You can do that. The federal government can do that. But but you can't change people's hearts through a mandate. You can't do that. You have to change a person's heart and their realizations of the truth. You know, you have to, that has to be done family by family, house by house, heart by heart. You can't, I didn't read this book, and I'm sorry that I didn't. I don't even know what book you're talking about, but I do have some opinions about what you guys are talking about.
well,
And you know, racism is an insidious disease.
Brian Massengill would agree with me.
And you just can't, you know, you got to change your neighbors, and you got to, when you see your neighbors, your white people, when you see your white people doing stuff, then you need to call it, you tell them that it's wrong. If my girlfriend is doing stuff, I'll tell kinds of women, and I'll tell them. You know, because it's, you know, you got to change that person's heart. You can't do that by a mandate and say you got to, because then that won't change anything. And in my opinion,
thank you.
I really agree with
I'm
you.
done.
The article we read, The Assumption of White Privilege and What We Can Do About It by Brian Massengill, he ends the article with, this is a soul sickness. And prayer is the most important thing we can do. You know, we can't really change other people's hearts. We can change our own heart. And by changing our own heart, it's going to change the people we love, the people around us. And when I have very bad vision today. Maureen was saying, I want to know what to say. You know, when people say something offensive, and we're going to all have to figure that out on our own. But something I've learned is you can say, ooh, that's kind of offensive to me, or I don't see it that way. If you use I statements and talk about how you feel, people can't really disagree with you. You're just saying that makes me feel very uncomfortable. Even something simple like say, what you just said really makes me feel uncomfortable. And hopefully you can start a dialogue there, but you don't want to end the dialogue before it starts by saying, that's racist. You know what I mean? If you say, you call somebody a racist, they're not going to listen to you. But if you say, boy, that makes me feel uncomfortable, or I don't see it that way, can you tell me more? You might be able to make some inroads. That's just my experience. I don't know if that will help or not.
I'd like to say, Lisa, go ahead. Hang on, Lisa. Lisa, go ahead. You've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks. Some of it was already said, I think, but I just think, you know, back to Father's point of lived experiences and getting to hear people's stories, I think is so important. I think it was illustrated by some of the comments, right? We got to hear about Father's experience of walking around the store and Angela's experience of teaching. And then we got to hear, and I'm sorry, I couldn't see everyone's names, but two other women commented, and, you know, there's that kind of shock, like that really happens, or, you know, why can't we use our voice to speak up? And I think it's, again, it goes back to just really illustrating that lived experience. When you get to live in the white, you know, under that white privilege and with that white solidarity, our experience is going to be very different. And it may not be easy to have your voice heard or even feel safe to speak up if you're being followed around in a store or other things. So I think, you know, I don't want to, I can't speak for anybody else's experience. I can only speak from my own, but I hope what I'm trying to learn is how I can use my privilege to step back and let other people step into
that space to to be there. So that's what I'm hoping to learn. And then Angela, the other point I want to make, Angela said really well, like, we have laws and legislation, but that doesn't mean they're going to be enacted, and that doesn't mean that they're going to be enforced. And I think that's the challenge we've certainly seen, and certainly we've been in an environment where, that this whole attitude of make America great again, like just that in itself, that one statement says so much about what does that mean as far as what we want to bring forward. And so I think we're in a challenging place. And I love having this opportunity to get to talk and hear different experiences. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right, Tom, if you want to say something, and then we'll go ahead and move along with Father John and Susan. So Tom, go ahead.
Thank you. I would just like to say that our Catholic Church is not completely free of racism. We have a song at our parish that we sing very often, all are in this place. And it doesn't matter who shows up at our doors. Yeah, come on in. But we don't actively go out and try to make people who don't look like us welcome. And as a former Catholic school teacher, I think most teachers on here would agree that one of the biggest thrills a teacher can have is when they learn a lesson from their kids. Well, I've got a former student now who's a young man, and he's very successful in the financial world. And I had a discussion about white privilege with him recently, and he mentioned about the Catholic Church. He said, "Yeah, I go to church on Sunday," and he said, "I see about as much diversity in there as a box of white crayons." And I thought that's one that's going to stick with me, and it really paints a clear picture.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, Father John and Susan, if you want to continue.
I just want to make one very quick comment about the speaking out and addressing it. And I can just say very honestly, I've had numerous occasions over the years of speaking out and addressing issues that I felt were certainly racially colored or racially motivated that affected me. And it didn't go anywhere. It just didn't go anywhere. The person listened until I left, and that was the end of it. No other action was taken, no recompense, not even, in some cases, not even an acknowledgement that what I was addressing was a problem. Okay, so that's another part of the racism, even with people in the positions of authority and leadership. When you go to them to address a problem and they clearly show that they're not interested in responding to your own need, your own situation, whatever your challenges or struggles or suffering, then it tells you, well, you just don't matter. Susan, I'll let you go from there if you want to move to chapter 4.
Susan, you're on mute.
Thank you. Tom spoke, really made me think of two of the resources. We included Sister Thea Bowman's speech to the bishops, the Catholic bishops. That was made back in 1988. And then there's also the statement of the Black Catholic Caucus, and that was made in 1968. So I think Tom and Father are right. Black people have told us what they need. They've told not only us, but the bishops. And guess what? Those things that Sister Thea asked for and the Black Catholic, they just haven't happened. So that's why as white people, maybe we can advocate for our Black friends in the Catholic Church. Change happens little at a time, but as we become more aware, I think we can step back and let people step forward, like Lisa said. But if you didn't get a chance to watch Sister Thea's speech, she sings a wonderful song in there. You will fall in love with her. So take a minute to watch that. And then there's also the statement of the Black Catholic clergy, and they made clear what African-American Catholics needed back in 1968. So, I think a lot of you have already mentioned that, Maureen and Claire and different people. Decades ago, we knew some of this was a problem. And I don't mean to be negative, but it's still out there. So we do need to look in our own hearts and just be very open to what we can do.
Hey, Susan, this is Joan. Hey, I've also had this comment from some of the other people. The Thea Bowman video is marked as private. So they're having a hard time accessing it. So I don't know if there's another video that we could look at here in the future.
Thank you. I will send another link because it opens for me, but I'll do some more research because it's beautiful. You will fall in love with this woman who's on the road to sainthood. She's, yeah. What did you say?
If you just Google it, it'll come.
Yeah,
You can find it easily.
If you Google Sister Thea Bowman's speech to the U.S. Catholic bishops, I think you'll find one on YouTube, but I will look again. Thank you for letting me know that.
Okay, good.
One thing I wanted to bring up is, I want you all to tell me what you think. Robin said that colorblind racism, and that was one of the questions on the syllabus. What is that? How have you experienced it? She says it starts out well-intentioned. What sounds bad about I don't see race, right? It sounds kind of good. We're all created equal. But it functions as denial, and Blacks are still discriminated against. So think about colorblind racism for a minute. How have you seen it operating? How has it been evident in your life? Colorblind racism. Maybe we need to hear from one of our Black folks. Why is that offensive? Because I've had that explained to me and it made sense, but I think I had to hear it from somebody who found it offensive.
I'm going to give you an example from myself. Trying to find a Black doll at Walmart could be a small example. Finding Black figurines, African-American Santa Claus, don't see it. In our world, everything is white because it's white by nature. But if I were to go to a friend's home and see nothing Black, nothing of any variety of race, or that sometimes could be colorblind racism.
Greeting cards.
I love it when my white friends say, "Oh, but I like you. You're a good Black."
Yeah.
I love that one.
And there is no, you know what? You don't get a colorblind, there is no such thing. There is no such thing as colorblind. I'm different. My skin is different. Yep. And you can't, and you don't see color here. You look at me, you don't see my color. That means you don't see me. You don't see me and who I am. And that's no good for me. Now, I don't know about everybody else, but that doesn't work for me. You have to accept me as who I am and how I am. I'm going to be different because I am different, but I'm human. I'm a human being for sure, and I'm a good human being. I'm a good human, but I am Black and I relish in that. I really, truly do. And to not see, you're right, Renee, to not see Black Santas anymore. I have some. I have like 10 that I've collected, but they just disappeared. And you have to go through these Herculean efforts to get things that are Afrocentric. You really do. But recognize that I am who I am. Don't tell me that you're colorblind, you don't see color. Of course I don't believe that. That doesn't sound credible to me. I know what you're trying to say, that I'm a fair person and I look at you as my friend, not my Black friend, but I am your Black friend. And I want you to recognize that. I recognize you as my white friend, my white sister, my white brother. We are different, but we are the same in that we are all human.
Yes.
That's how I feel.
I have some friends of mine, they're white Americans, and they told me that they were building a cabin out in Nolan Lake, and they said anytime I wanted to get away, I could go out and use the cabin in Nolan Lake whenever they weren't using it. And then the wife said to the husband, "Oh, you can't have John go to Nolan Lake. That's Ku Klux Klan country. That's a dangerous place for Black people." And so he called me. He's someone who doesn't see, he claims he doesn't see color. So he called, he wanted to know if I was mad with him for building a house in Nolan Lake. I said, no, it's your money, you do what you want to do. He said, but you can't, I'm told that you can't come. I said, I'm not interested in coming there because I don't believe that they're interested in seeing me there. Okay. Well, you know, if anything happened to you, I'd go after them like you're my own family. I said, that's not going to do me a whole lot of good. Okay. You take your house in Nolan Lake and you enjoy it, but don't expect to see me there. Okay. Everything I've been telling you all along is still very real. And so I am not about to go into Nolan Lake for any reason whatsoever. But that's just color blindness.
I have an example, I guess like color blindness that I've seen like over the years, you know, if I'm with, in my predominant life is mostly white people. And so when we're telling stories, we're, you know, like if you tell a story, you're just describing, well, you know, this person was here, this person was here. And so, and then like someone will tell a story and then they'll be like, you know, and then this guy comes in, well, he was Black and da, da, da. And I started realizing like, you know, we don't say, well, this is a white person, you know, when you're telling the story, but you say it's a Black person, you know, which it's just, it was an interesting thing. And I'm not trying to say it like to not see color, but there's times to see color and there's times not, like, if it doesn't have any meaning in the story, really, I always wondered why there's the need to feel like you have to point that out. It always made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Now, sometimes there is, you know, it's part of the story, but, you know, I think this whole thing on color blindness, I think the book said this, and I've certainly experienced, I think there was a period of time, I remember there was an In Vogue song from the 90s, you know, it was about, you know, like, you know, like it was basically saying like, you know, be colorblind. Why do we have to see each other for color? Why can't we treat each other, you know, respect? And I think there was a period of time where it was supposed to say like, look, we're all human, we're all that. But then if you take it, like Angela said, if it goes to the point where you're not seeing color, where you're not seeing who somebody is, like my color white makes me who I am, and you know, and my Italian heritage or my this, that's all part of who I am. And I do want people to see that. So I think it is important to see that the richness and the diversity of our colors, but not to have it be something that separates, divides, and subordinates.
Yes.
I don't know if that made sense.
Yes. Sandra, oh, sorry.
I just wanted to share, Stan Yanchus, Champaign, Urbana, Illinois. I mentioned last week that in our school district, you know, that racial equity and just tremendous gaps in African-American achievement have been a major topic for 30 some plus years. We've just been having this conversation over and over again. And this very comment that you made happened over my 30-year career multiple times in teacher meetings where people would make that statement and say it as a way of trying to create unity. I don't see color. My students could be Black or purple or green, whatever. And when I was a little earlier into my teaching career, I didn't handle that too well. I would just ask them the question. I said, I would just have one question I want to ask you. Have you spoken to any of your students of color and asked them if, not in the classroom in front of them, but ask them if their race is important to their identity? And we all know what the answer was every time. And again, I proved points, but I didn't move anyone. Later in my career, the same thing would come up. I asked that question openly in a group, and when someone would make that statement, you would look around the room, if there were in the teacher's lounge where people ate lunch, or out in a group, or in one of the sessions, diversity sessions we were having, you'd see the heads nodding about the people who were in agreement with that statement. And when I would ask that question, have any of you, talked to any of your students of color and asked them that question uniformly? It was always no, but there would be a shutdown. And what I learned is that I was making points, but I don't think was impacting or helping students of color in any way. So later in my career, when that would come up, and it continually comes up, and I'm sure it's still, I've been retired for 11 years, and I'm sure it's still coming up in the classroom and in group discussions. But then I would go to that individual privately and ask that question. And when the answer came, I would say, I knew students. And I would say, do you have so-and-so in your class? Do you know so-and-so? Did you, and, I think this is a student who would be comfortable if you asked her, if you asked him privately that question to share with you. And I did that. And when I did that, I would get, people would come back to me, the individuals, and say, thank you. Thank you. And it's just something we have to ask that question. And and again, I just felt reservation about the fact that I felt like I had to do it privately, but it had more impact in doing that and doing it in a group, exactly what D'Angela talks about in her book, that self-defense mechanism of feeling attacked. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stan.
Sandra?
Hi there. My name's Sandra. I live in Louisville. I wanted to just read something that really kind of hit me. This is on page 54, and it's just, the title is Freedom from the Burden of Race. And basically just says, as a white person, I don't carry the psychic weight of race. I don't have to worry about how others feel about my race, nor do I have to worry that my race will be held against me. And I just found that really powerful, because I think a lot of what I've gotten out of the book is that, our Black brothers and sisters are exhausted. They're tired, of dealing with this. And it's just something, as a white person, that it's just hard for me to comprehend, to have to deal with what Father Judy was talking about, walking in a store. And I have seen that myself in the grocery store before, where I'm walking and I see a Black man walk past me, and there will be a white person, this woman, who they clutch their purse. I mean, I've seen that happen many times, just watching it. And it's really kind of heartbreaking, but I'm grateful for this book, because it's really been very eye-opening for me. And I feel like it's a way to start conversations. And I agree with what everyone was saying earlier, that, laws and things can help, and we have to go that direction, but it's really having conversations with your own family members, which is very difficult to do sometimes, with your coworkers, when you hear or see things that, as a white person, we have to step up and do and say something. It's really important, because our Black brothers and sisters need that support, and they need us to step up and do that. And I think that that's something that we should be doing. And I'm glad that people are here in this class, and there's so many people in this class, and that if each one of us just makes one impact one time a week with somebody in our family or a friend group or coworkers, that hopefully that will carry on, and they will also then have the courage to say something or do something the next time they see something that's inappropriate. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. Eileen, did you have something to say?
Wanted to follow up on Stan, but I see that he left. Stan taught at the high school where my kids went. I'm also from Champaign-Urbana. And I remember going to the principal's office, because sometimes my kids were in trouble, and seeing a poster that said, there is no race, just the human race. And I have 6 adopted kids that we brought in through foster care, multiracial family. And Stan and I are about the same age. We were raised with that same principle, about seeing the common humanity in each other. But when I raised Black kids, I began to understand, just as we've talked about, if I can't see them and see their color, then I'm not really seeing them. But I think, as I've aged, I've come to wonder if maybe we needed to that stage before we could get to the second stage. Mm-hmm. If we needed to see our common humanity first, and then learn to know about and to appreciate the complexity of our color and our ethnic differences. So that was, and I have a question also. I don't know how to get through our parish, because even though we live in a very progressive university community, and we're in probably the most progressive parish in our town, we weren't allowed to have a book study on white fragility.
I would just get on back.
And so I'm wondering, how do we get past this fear of offending people and the kind of political divide that is common in a lot of our parishes, and talk directly to issues of race? That's my question.
I'll let Paul or Susan, they've had some challenges in their own parish from the very first time we did the book study. Maybe they would have a comment on that for you.
We have a very supportive pastor, and he allowed us to do a white fragility book study. But most of our best friends didn't do it. And there was a lot of negative feedback. Mostly it didn't come to us, it went to the pastor, and he handled it very well. He said, have you read the book? Because people were giving him criticism that this was not a faith-based book, but it is a book recommended by the Office of Multicultural Ministries in the Archdiocese of Louisville. So he said, well, have you read the book? And they said, no. And he goes, read the book and then come back and talk to me. And I don't think anybody came back and talked to him. But we do know something's going on now, because we're trying to do a book study of Brian Massengill's book, Racial Justice in the Catholic Church. And we're doing it outside the parish. I decided I didn't want the pastor to take any more heat. And so we're just sending out emails to the people that came to our other study. And we're doing the book study anyway as individuals, not as the parish. But I wish I knew how to deal with that kind of issue. We know other people in other states who are having the same issue, who are trying to have a white fragility book study, and their parish is not on board with it. So all I can say is we can still do it. Even if you don't do it under your parish, you could do it on your own. Start with your friends or family, and then go from there maybe. I wish I knew the answer though. I don't know why it's a tough topic. We're very fragile, right? And our friends are very fragile. And so I think we have to keep going anyway and invite people to the study that will come, but it's not going to be well received from some people.
Can I just give a suggestion that if you do decide to put something like that together, extend it to people of the opposite race, so you can hear just like now, you guys can hear the experiences that we go through. It's like a bunch of women talking about childbirth, but it's all women. How are you going to make a man see what that feels like if there's no men there?
Oh, no. I don't want to go to that.
Well, you talk about something else, but you get the hint.
Well, you can certainly be sympathetic.
I'm grateful. We have done 2 studies. One was through the parish, was the White Fragility book study. And then mostly with people that did that, we did a second multimedia study where we had podcasts and YouTube videos and things. So, for instance, the Brian Massengill one was in that multimedia study. And that also included Indigenous people, Asian Americans. We kind of broadened the scope. And Father John helped us. He actually had, I think, 3 or 4 African Americans join that study. And we've reached out to them for this one we're going to do in Lent. Haven't heard back from very many people yet, so I don't know how that's going to go. But I agree. It's much, much better if you have different cultures, different ethnicities, because you get the insight that we can't possibly give on our own because we just don't have that background.
Well, when we decided to do white fragility, it really came from a small group in the parish. The first person I called was Father John and said, we want to do this. Will you help? Because I knew I couldn't do it. I can't speak for African American people. And so we definitely believe that we need a mixed group. Yes.
Yes. I think Sharon wanted to say something.
Well, maybe. You know, when I look at all of us, and we are predominantly white people on this book study, I'm so glad Father John is here, and some of our other African American and brown friends and Black friends are with us. I would almost love to see this book study with an all Black group and just a few white people. I would love to know what the majority of Black people feel about this particular book, and does it really hit what they know to really be the issue. When I first thought about joining, I wasn't sure because I Googled who the author was. I saw that she was white, and I thought, it's just another white person that's going to try to tell me how to understand what's been going on, and I can't because I've never been there. You know, chapter 4 really resonated with me when it started talking about think about your school and think about this and think about that. It was my life. I mean, I lived in a very narrow window. I mean, my high school was predominantly white. I had 3 or 4 Black classmates. So I would really like to know what the Black and brown people that have read this book think about the book, and does it really address what they think the issues are and what the work we need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It makes sense, but I don't know if you'd be ready to hear the truth. Because in the shoes that we walk in, I don't know if you'd be tough enough to handle it, because when we are faced with racist thoughts and racist words and racist actions, it has become almost inbred and part of our nature. I'm used to it. What else you got? So I walk across the street and you holler nigger. Oh, well, whatever. You know, I mean, seriously, you know, but if a person that has never experienced that feels or sees or empathizes with what we go through, whew, it's tough. It's tough. I've got a whole list of things I could tell you about, but I'm still standing. February the 8th, 2021, I'm still here. I have still been as successful as I am, despite all the hardships that I went through. So it's tough.
I think one of the biggest maybe realizations or revelations is to be able to embrace the fact that for Black people, this is a lifelong experience. This is not something that just kind of happened some years ago for us. We grew up, we entered this world knowing that we were subject to a dominant white culture in this country. And there's so many instances of policies, government policies, systemic practices that have been in place that have always designed to keep white people on the top and Black people on the bottom. This is our whole life. And so for us we could certainly sit and talk about this, but personally, what I like about the book is I like the fact that Robin is white, addressing it with white people, because we've been trying to say this for 400 years and feel like nobody has been willing to listen to us. Maybe you listen to one another then.
And the other thing about Robin, she has worked for 30 years as a diversity instructor, and she has talked to white people for 30 years about racism and gotten all of these reactions she explains. You know, she's sharing her lived experience with us. So that to me makes it authentic and valuable. If you really, I tell you a book that really helped me understand more about the Black experience. I'm not saying I understand it because I haven't lived it, but the book Caste, C-A-S-T-E, and Warmth of Other Suns will have you crying. It is so poignant. And it's Isabel Wilkerson. But honestly, it is hard. And you and I can read that book and it will rock you to your core, because she explains Black lived experience through the eyes of quite a few different real people who lived in the last decades. But I mean, it is just, it's just mind-boggling. It will rock your insides. But what I realized reading that book, no matter how tough it was for me to read that book, I could put the book down.
Mm-hmm.
A Black person can't put their experiences down. It's their life, you know? So I don't know that we'll ever get it totally, but reading Black authors, like James Baldwin tells it like it is. And he started doing that years ago. And Isabel Wilkerson and Ibram Kendi, those people will help you get your head around some of the atrocities that our Black brothers and sisters have faced. This book is supposed to help us get into our own hearts, our own families, our own workplaces, our own neighborhoods, and do the little things here and there that we can do, and hopefully make a big impact. But it's going to take years, weeks, days, months, years to make that impact. But yeah,
I certainly think the book has. I wasn't trying to say that it wasn't. It's so hard to fathom, and I'm just so sorry, and I don't know what to do. So I'm here, and I'm glad to hear the other comments.
No, you made a very good point. I mean, I honestly think, we're white people talking about something we don't really understand. So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah. Lynn?
Yeah, I totally agree with a lot of the stuff that's being said, but I think the point of the book is to realize how much white people, myself, are living such a poor quality of life because of our refusal, our inability to see the suffering or the way other people are being treated. So there's a real lack of goodness, not goodness, there's a lack of the deeper value of our life as white people that we could have if we could awaken, and that means that we have to really change a lot of our attitudes. So it's not just to hear the suffering of the Blacks or the non-whites, very important, but it's this look at how half lives we have because of the attitudes we have about things.
Yes.
Of being dominant and taking it for granted. Yeah. That's what I'm getting from her book. So that was the insight.
Yeah. Thank you.
Tom?
Tom? Susan, I don't want you to think this is a personal attack against you, but just something you said is something I've observed in group situations for many years, is when we have a mixed race group, it's usually the Black people are smaller in number. And when we go looking for someone who's going to be a Black person to participate in the group, always one or two who appear at least to be qualified. And those one or two seem like they are constantly pounded. We want you to be our guy this time. And it's kind of what you said, Susan, when you said the first person you thought was to go to Father John. And I've seen it over and over again.
Good point. That's a good point.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left until 8:30. So Father John or Susan, for those who are going to stay till 8:30, is there anything that you would like to wrap up or talk about?
I'd be interested in hearing from everyone in terms of, this is only the second session that we're having, but just with everything that has been shared from last week to this week, I'd just be interested in hearing from anyone. What have you seen or done, or what has been different about you from these two sessions that we've had thus far?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm Brenda from Jeffersonville, and I was in my early life, I was a sound engineer, and I went on the road with an all-Black 14-piece band for 4 years, and then dated a gentleman in the band for 10 years, and it changed me. It changed me. I saw the struggle, and then I joined a swim club in the East End. I bring my boyfriend, but he's not allowed. So I quit. I got my friends to quit. it's been a struggle. I see it.
No. Oh,
I
good.
also went into stores. Where are the black dolls? It may be an activist.
Good.
I became a social worker.
Great. Thank you.
Carmel?
One of the things that came to my light recently, just because of this book and these discussions, is it's a real kind of we talked about first world problem. Well, this is kind of a Bardstown world problem, in that I'm involved in trying to renovate or save this building called Anatoch, which is a historic home that was associated with the Black activist Catholic person, Daniel Rudd. And a lot of people are saying, well, you're just pulling the race card to try and get the Black folks to help you all save this building so you could just have another historic building being saved in the area. And I honestly, at first thought, well, no, I want to use this as a conversation to say, has the Catholic Church, have we at St. Joe's done what we need to do to address the concerns of our friends at St. Monica's and the folks in the church? So that was the one thing that kind of was here already. But what came to me in this, because of this book, was just to point out how racially blind we are to this. And the example I want to say is, we in Bardstown have really hung on to our association with Stephen Foster, who may or may not have ever been here, right? But everybody knows who Stephen Foster is. Okay, we have really hung on to Thomas Merton, who lived 15 miles down the road. If there was a building that either the Archdiocese or St. Joe's or Bethlehem High School owned that somebody wanted to tear down that was associated with Thomas Merton, we'd be all over it and say, no, you can't do that. Thomas Merton's home, whether he just lived there, went to school there once, whatever, we wouldn't dare touch it. But Daniel Rudd, we don't know him. He was a speaker, he was a writer, he was very influential in his day and owned a newspaper, a national newspaper, as a Black man who was born a slave. And he did all this. And yet we're like, it's an old building. Nobody needs it. Nobody wants it. Bethlehem High School doesn't, but the difference is, if anybody knew that Daniel Rudd was just every bit as influential and active as a writer and a speaker and an activist as Thomas Merton was, but we just don't know that. But again, if somebody said, Thomas Merton, oh my gosh, you can't tear down his building. But we're blind because Daniel Rudd is not a white male. He was a Black slave. He was a long time ago, whatever. Right, that's all I'm gonna say.
Donna?
Carmel, real quick, somebody wants you to put your GoFundMe page in the chat. So if you have a GoFundMe page for your building, put it in the chat for, I think it was Emily or whoever wants it. Okay.
Okay, I
Donna?
just want to say that I guess I have to give a little tiny background. I go to what I feel is a very Catholic church. It is not sanctioned by the Archdiocese, and it is extremely diverse. And it was that diversity that got me all involved in this. When I began to see the people around me in the pews and the treatment that they got when they left our pews. We, just like the man said, I think he was from Illinois, sing all are welcome. We do that, but we put our money where our mouth is too. We really have a great deal of diversity in that church, but it has caused me and other members to really snowball. We have taken the Just Faith Ministries of Faith and Racial Equity. We have read everything we can. I get discouraged being a white person, like I'm sure so many of us in this audience do, that we can't really just blink our eye or rub our nose or do whatever and change life as it is. But I feel like I'm the same age as you, Father John. I feel like I'm learning so much. I wish I had known this a long time ago. I'm not sure it would make a difference. It would make a difference in my heart and my soul. but I am just amazed at what I am learning. So, and I'm also very thrilled that these books are coming out as quickly as they are. Cast was wonderful. One of my favorites, easy read, was I'm Still Here, which I think Susan mentioned earlier. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I thought White Fragility was a little tough, so I read it twice. It was tough the first time. It was probably tougher the second. Not tough on so much on my heart as it was my head. I really had a lot to absorb this time. So that's my answer, Father.
Great, thank you, Doctor. Anyone else in the last couple of minutes?
I would just like to offer Trevor Noah's book called Born a Crime, which takes place in Africa with the apartheid. It's just a great read on accepting racism. His mother is African and his father was German Swiss. And the title Born a Crime was he was born when his mom and right after they got married, and they weren't supposed to be married, of course. But there is humor in the book, but there is so much explanation of him accepting who he is as a person. It's a beautiful read. The other thing I'd like to say, this has opened my eyes to why service is so important in our lives, and getting out and integrating ourselves into the service circles. We can't do much right now because of the pandemic, but I know I took a lot of high school girls and we would spend one day at a time with the homeless people in Louisville. And it is so good to come out of your comfort zone. And I think that's what a lot of you are saying. The fears that you have of doing that on a regular basis, but I think it shapes your mind and your heart with what this book is talking about. And there are soup kitchens all over Louisville where you can help and volunteer, and you will see the same people come to these places and have conversations with them, and they'll start calling you on a first name basis. And it's just a good way for me to get out of my comfort zone and to make me aware of all the people that are in God's family.
Yes.
And then
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
Okay, we've come up on our 8:30 mark. I will keep this open for 15 more minutes. If anybody needs to drop off, please feel free to, and we will meet next Monday. If you would like to stay on for a few more minutes, I will keep it open.
Thanks, Joan. I think one of the things that Barbara was talking about is just a general concept that when we look at the whole spectrum of what's going on in our world, in our society, in our lives, in our church, we really need to do a better job of taking better care of one another. And sometimes we have to understand the life situation of the other person before we can understand how we can best respond in a positive, supportive, and healing way. But the opportunities are there.
Can I add something, please?
Yes, please do.
I'm an Irish immigrant, and I grew up in a Polish ethnic parish. And my dad was the custodian, and we were the only Irish in the parish. And it was not a comfortable place. Then one day I went to the local park and I found a little girl there, and we got along so well. And I said, why don't you come home with me and you can play at my house? And I got home and my mother said, she can't be here. And I couldn't understand why not. you know, because at that point, you know, it was someone I met, it was someone I wanted to be friends with. And my mom said, no, she can't be here because she's Black. And I thought, as a young child, how terrible that was to experience my own mother being that bigoted. And I have tried in my life to retain that attitude that I had as a young child, where I saw people and I didn't see color. And anytime I've had the opportunity to meet or greet someone that's different from me, I always try to be open and receptive, because there is so much to learn from anybody you meet. But especially, I think that there are people whose voices aren't heard. And this program, I love hearing everybody's voice. And I think that I'm learning and growing so much from it. And I find the fact that this is being studied as being very, not only enlightening, but encouraging. You know, because I'm getting to the age where it's like, well, is anything ever going to change? And this feels like change to me. And I'm really glad to have this opportunity. So I want to thank everybody.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I agree with you. I do think it feels like change. And I think it's going to happen one person at a time. And if any of you have any ideas of how we can start conversations with people, I'd really like to hear them now. You know, have you thought about, you know, what are some of the conversations I need to have and how am I going to do that? That might be something we'd all like to hear. Yes.
My name is Jody Jackson. We're raising a 10-year-old, and he goes to a small Catholic school, and it's very diverse. But what the book has done for me, it's been a call to action. You know, it's made me realize, I think, number one, I'm not praying about this enough. I've got a big role here. You know, I need to be a change agent. And I think one of the things, I started to draft a letter to the head of the school just to ask about the curriculum, you know, and then what's my role in the home and educating and teaching and, you know, and making sure that, you know, my children and my child is hearing the history and understands and knows, and he's coming from a place of compassion. And, you know, and what really resonated with me with chapters 3 and 4 on color blindness was it's that by not acknowledging a person's skin color, we're dismissing, right? I love the quote, dismissing the very different experience in life that person has had. You know, that's very powerful. And, you know, it really resonated, you know, just made me really think about things. So that's one thing. I think there's a call to action. We need to start with this, you know, what's going on with the curriculum? What are we teaching kids about history? And we talked about it last week. And how do we change that? Is that something we can do?
Yes.
I think schools teach a very watered down version of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like I say, it's watered down. You know, it's controlled, and it's in a nice way. You know, I raise a 10-year-old son, and me raising a Black son is not the same as you raising a white son. I have to teach my child what it's like if you get pulled over by the police. We have to have the talk for a 10-year-old. He's already experienced racism at his young age, because at the daycare that he was at, he came, you know, when I picked him up one day, he was crying because one of the little kids her father told her that they couldn't be friends because he was brown. He couldn't understand what that meant. How do you explain that to a 6-year-old? And like I say, in school, you know, it is so controlled all the way from what students go to what school. You know, I've got a girlfriend that's a principal at one of the West End schools. All the bad Black students get sent to her school. Now, if we were to ship these kids to the schools in their district, the schools would be more multiracial. But when you get the bad kids over here who are problem children being bused all the way across the county to the Black schools, the low performing schools, so they can continue to be low performing, and those children don't have an opportunity in her school. She's doing all she can to turn it around, but she can't because the school district won't allow it. They're shipping the problem kids away from the white schools and sending them to her into town. That by itself is a form of racism because it's controlled. Then when you go to school, you hear about Christopher Columbus. He discovered something that was already there. How do you put your name on something? And as usual, white people tend to take everything that don't belong to them, put their stamp of approval and their patent and their name is on it. And it's like they discovered it. Who discovered shea butter? White folks didn't do that. That was Black people. That was in Africa. But no, Jergens is and everybody else has got their patent on it. It's got a little drop of shea butter, and that belongs to us. So, you know, you have to be careful. So for me, for my 10-year-old son, I have to teach my own Black history. I have to teach him that the first 11 or 12 Kentucky Derbies was won by Black jockeys until they were not allowed to be part of the good old boys club. And so they could no longer participate in the race. They can't participate because you're not in our club. So that means you can't win. And so you have to sort of take control for yourself. And, you know, I guess for white families, you have to purposely teach your children about other cultures. You know, it's not just for Black people, it's for all cultures. You know, we're all God's children. In religion and in the church, you know, I'm kind of a radical person. I'm the person that speaks out. I'm the Black sheep. If you read the Bible, Jesus' skin was of polished bronze.
Yes.
I have never seen bronze the color of white. I don't know what piece of bronze you got in your house that's white. He had hair of, what they say, cotton wool. Sounds like a Black person to me. But you take a Black Jesus in church, oh, them folks gonna go nuts. But, you know, I know that's off the subject, but like I say, it's just, and I also appreciate this because this is a good forum, and I love the fact that we have cameras, because when you deal with people in social media, they get real ballsy behind social media, and they're quite nasty, you know, and I appreciate all of you participating. I appreciate people being honest. And, you know, some people they just don't know because they don't understand that some of the things they do is racist. So, but anyway, let me get off here.
Thanks.
Y'all have a good night.
Yeah, I can tell you, I'm also the youth minister at the cathedral, and I'm doing a series of 1-hour retreats with my youth group on racism, and they know that the cathedral's got, I mean, there's smart kids everywhere, but they're from freshman to senior in high school. They know, they want to know, you know, what can they do. In fact, one of the kids in my class, she's in a book study, and she said, Miss Jones, she said, I really hate to say this, she said, but there's a lot of old people that need to die so that I can take over. I was like, I know where you're coming from, I get it. I was like, but that makes me feel good, because even with the 4 or 5 kids that I'm ministering to, I see that corner being turned. You know, I see that they, you know, they already want to know what can they do to be allies, what can they do to make a difference, and they're in high school. So, you know, even if it's just a handful of kids, and that's what I told them, you know, it just takes one person, you know, to start a movement. And so ministering to the kids at the cathedral, from their perspective, it gives me a lot of hope.
Good, good.
Cool. I
Good.
have a story of inspiration that one of the priests shared with me. One of the Association of U.S. Catholic Priests shared, and he was at a parish that was mostly African American, and there was this very dynamic sister who became principal. And one of the first things she did was walk into each classroom, take down the picture of Jesus, and replace it with a Black Jesus. And she went to every classroom and did that. Isn't that beautiful? And she did it very, and she told the boys, I think it was mostly boys, and maybe it was both, but she said, I want you to know Jesus looked like you. Isn't that beautiful?
Yes.
So there are things we can do that are true and real that can really make a difference. And this was a little white nun, and I think she was an Ursuline sister, but I was very proud of that story, hearing that story, because I thought that's what we need to do. We need to be Jesus for others, right?
Yes.
Right. Go ahead. Go ahead. I see you
Unmute
raise it.
yourself.
Yeah, unmute.
Unmute. You have to unmute. We can't hear you.
There
There
we
you
go. Technology, you gotta love it. When I was reading the newspaper once, there was an article about a woman who had made a form of Jesus where it was a Black Jesus, but the face could have been a woman rather than a man. I mean, it was like so inclusive that I kept the article for years and years, and then it got lost in the shuffle. But I always wanted to have that Jesus in my house because it made me feel so good to see Jesus represented as he probably looked, and also that there was this feminine integrated into Jesus too. It just, if any of you ever find or know how to get a hold of that Jesus, we should mass produce it.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
There it is.
Oh, my husband found it. So maybe we can share it. We'll send it to Joan.
Okay. All right. So I've got us coming up on 8:45. So we will, I'll do a quick prayer in closing. So in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, thank you again for bringing us together for this book study. As we know that you have taught us to love others as we would want to be loved. As we go through this week, please help us to understand others and maybe reach out a friendly hand or say a kind word to them when we see them. Please watch over us as we leave this space and we go back to our communities and our friends. And please keep us safe throughout this week. We ask this in your name. Amen.
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 Yeah,
Right.
very
Thank
nice.
you all. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll send it
Very
to
nice.
them.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Good to
Thank
be
you,
with you
everybody.
tonight.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night and a good week.
Yes.